He loved Jesus. He has a compelling life story, and he is a distinguished man of science and healing. May I introduce the Director of Pediatric Neurosurgery at one of the world's great hospitals, Johns Hopkins in Baltimore, Dr. Benjamin Carson, Sr.
Now, it's not my intention to offend anyone. I have discovered, however, in recent years that it's very difficult to speak to a large group of people these days and not offend someone. We've reached a point where people are afraid to actually talk about what they want to say because somebody might be offended. We've got to get over this sensitivity. You know, and it keeps people from saying what they really believe. I'm very, very compassionate, and I'm not ever out to offend anyone. But PC is dangerous. Because you see, this country, one of the founding principles was freedom of thought and freedom of expression. And it muffles people. It puts a muzzle on them. And at the same time, keeps people from discussing important issues while the fabric of their society is being changed. And we cannot fall for that trick. And what we need to do is start talking about things that are important, things that were important in the development of our nation. Well, one of those things was education. I'm very passionate about education because it's made such a big difference in my life. But here we are at a time in the world, the information age, the age of technology. And yet, 30% of people who enter high school in this country do not graduate. 44% of people who start a 4-year college program do not finish it in 4 years. What is that about? Think back to a darker time in our history, 200 years ago when slavery was going on. It was illegal to educate a slave, particularly to teach him to read. Why do you think that was? Because when you educate a man, you liberate a man. And there I was as a youngster, placing myself in the same situation that a horrible institution did because I wasn't taking advantage of the education. I was a horrible student. Most of my classmates thought I was the stupidest person in the world. They called me dummy. I was the butt of all the jokes. Now, admittedly, it was a bad environment. Single parent home. You know, my mother and father had gotten divorced early on. My mother got married when she was 13. She was one of 24 children. Had a horrible life. Discovered that her husband was a bigamist. Had another family. And she only had a 3rd grade education. She had to take care of us. Dire poverty. Had a horrible temper, poor self-esteem. All the things that you think would preclude success. But I had something very important. I had a mother who believed in me. And I had a mother who would never allow herself to be a victim, no matter what happened. What about our taxation system? So complex. There is no one who can possibly comply with every jot and tittle of our tax. If I wanted to get you or you, I could get you on a tax issue. That doesn't make any sense. What we need to do is come up with something that's simple. And when I pick up my Bible, you know what I see? I see the fairest individual in the universe, God, and He's given us a system. It's called tithe. Now, we don't necessarily have to do it 10%, but it's principle. He didn't say, if your crops fail, don't give me any tithes. He didn't say, if you have a bumper crop, give me triple tithes. So there must be something inherently fair about proportionality. You make $10 billion, you put in $1 billion. You make $10, you put in $1. Of course, you got to get rid of the loopholes. But now some people say, well, that's not fair because it doesn't hurt the guy who made $10 billion as much as the guy who made 10. Where does it say you have to hurt the guy? He just put $1 billion in the pot. You know, we don't need to hurt him. You know, it's that kind of thinking. It's that kind of thinking that has resulted in 602 banks in the Cayman Islands. That money needs to be back here, building our infrastructure and creating jobs. And we're smart enough We're smart enough to figure out how to do that. We've already started down the path of solving one of the other big problems, healthcare. We need to have good healthcare for everybody. It's the most important thing that a person can have. Money means nothing, titles means nothing when you don't have your health. But we got to figure out efficient ways to do it. We spend a lot of money on healthcare, twice as much per capita as anybody else in the world, and yet not very efficient. What can we do? Here's my solution. When the person is born, give them a birth certificate, an electronic medical record, and a health savings account, to which money can be contributed pre-tax from the time you're born to the time you die. When you die, you can pass it on to your family members so that when you're 85 years old and you got 6 diseases, you're not trying to spend up everything. You're happy to pass it on, and there's nobody talking about death panels. That's number one. And also, for the people who are indigent, who don't have any money, we can make contributions to their HSA each month because we already have this huge pot of money. Instead of sending it to some bureaucracy, let's put it in their HSAs. Now they have some control over their own health care. And what do you think they're going to do? They're going to learn very quickly how to be responsible. When Mr. Jones gets that diabetic foot ulcer, he's not going to the emergency room and blowing a big chunk of it. He's going to go to the clinic. He learns that very quickly. Gets the same treatment. In the emergency room, they send him out. In the clinic, they say, now let's get your diabetes under control so you're not back here in 3 weeks with another problem. That's how we begin to solve these kinds of problems. It's much more complex than that, and I don't have time to go into it all, but we can do all of these things because we're smart people. One nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. God bless.
Thank you. I am absolutely delighted to be here once again. And it seems like each time I'm here, we're getting closer to critical time periods in our country. I started to talk about all the failures of the current administration, but I figured that was too depressing. But, it's interesting to me how the left in particular loves to relabel and name things. For instance, if you're pro-life, then you're anti-woman. If you're pro-traditional family, then you're a homophobe. If you're white and you oppose a progressive black person, you're a racist. If you're black and you oppose the progressive agenda, you're crazy. And if you're black and you oppose the progressive agenda and you're pro-life and you're pro-family, they don't even know what to call you. I mean, you end up on some kind of watch list for extremists. Unbelievable. You think about, there's a large number of people in our country who are the downtrodden. And how do we treat them? Well, starting in the 60s with the Great Society programs, we figured if we just threw money at the problem, and we had all these welfare programs, that we could solve the problems. What has happened since then? In 1969, 1.4% of our population was on food stamps. Today, more than 14% are on food stamps, a 10-fold increase. We have more broken families, out-of-wedlock births, incarceration, crime. Everything that these programs were supposed to fix has gotten worse. Intelligent people would look at that and they would say, we need to change course. People who perhaps fail to utilize their intellectual capability would look at that and say, we need to do it more. We didn't do enough. And, that's the difference. It really is not compassionate to pat people on the head and say, there, you poor little thing. I'm going to take care of all your needs, your health care, and your food, and your housing. don't you worry about anything because it's all those bad people who's causing your problem, and I'm going to fix it. That's not compassion. That's the opposite of compassion. That is making people dependent. What real compassion is using our intellect to find ways to allow those people to climb out of dependency and realize the American dream. And that's what we need to be thinking about. But what are the things that are going to destroy us as a nation? Our debt, 18.1 trillion and rising. We need to get out of the mindset that says because the debt didn't go up as fast in this quarter, it's a victory. The debt needs to be going down. The size of government needs to be going down. We need to be able to deal with that in a logical way. The other thing that threatens to destroy us, radical Islamic terrorists all over the world. And let's not get distracted by just ISIS. We need to recognize that the Shia in Iran are every bit as dangerous, perhaps even more dangerous. We could take our eye off the ball as they develop nuclear weapons. We also need to recognize that we have friends over there. Let's not turn our back on Israel. Let's listen to Netanyahu and what he has to say. What am I for? What am I really ready for? I'm not ready for Hillary, but what am I ready for? I'm ready for a country that puts our Constitution on the top shelf, every part of it. And for those who have any doubt, that includes the Second Amendment. Now, I'm for a country where we take the restraints off the most dynamic economy the world has ever known. Let that economic engine work for us. I'm for a country where we develop our natural energy resources. We have been blessed with them. Let's not make that a curse. That's a wonderful thing. And it doesn't mean that we can't also look for alternatives and take care of the environment. Some people think it's one or the other. It's not one or the other. That's why God gave us these fancy brains so we can do more than one thing at one time. You know, I'm ready for leadership on the world stage, not just sitting around and waiting to see what other people do. I'm ready for school choice. You know, we need to recognize education is the great liberator in our country. No one has to be a victim. I'm for putting our health care in our hands and not in the hands of some bureaucrat. And for balancing our budget. And for a fair taxation system that allows us to get rid of the IRS. In the pre-revolutionary days, our ancestors, they got together, they talked about what kind of country did they want, what were they willing to fight for, and they did fight for it. We have to be willing to fight for it. The baton is now in our hands. We need to talk to our uncle who hasn't voted in 20 years. Go to your grandmother who's an invalid and make sure she has an absentee ballot. Help her fill it out. The baton is ours. Freedom is not free. It must be fought for. And remember, we live in the land of the free and the home of the brave, but you cannot be free if you're not brave. Thank you very much.
Thousands of conservatives gathering at CPAC kickoff just outside Washington. Griff Jenkins takes you to CPAC.
Who best represents your values among those running for the nomination in 2016?
Carson, hands down.
Right.
I'm ready for a country that puts our Constitution on the top shelf.
Because we've never been in politics before. We heard him at the prayer breakfast. He told us exactly what we needed, and we need this man so bad.
Primarily because he's not a politician, right? Because I think he's the most genuine candidate.
The real message is that, you know, America is for us, it's for the people. It's not for the government. The government is there to serve us and not us to serve the government.
He is a patriot, not a politician. He combines a high degree of intelligence with common sense and patriotism, kind of a difficult combination to get these days in Washington, D.C.